Hawa. Pura vida, mi gente. Hey, how you guys doing? Thanks for tuning in. Much love and respect. Appreciate you guys taking the time to go ahead and watch these presentations, hear me reading these books, these sources, talk about history. I really appreciate that. We're going to get into a quick video today. Pretty interesting topic. I'm actually working on something bigger right now, so I wanted to go ahead and drop this in between. We're going to read from this book right here. It says Sea and Land, Cultural and Biological Adaptations in the Southern Coastal Plain by James L. Peacock and James C. Sabella, editors. And this is from the Southern Anthropological Society, Proceedings, number 21. So Mary W. Helms, series editor. Okay. And we go to page 76 of this anthropological journal here. We're going to read this article. It's called Articulatory Relationships, the Waccamaw Struggle Against Assimilation. And then Patricia B. Lurch, right? This is the writer of this particular article. And we're going to see what it says real quick, do some little side commentary on it. Anthropologists, historians, and sociologists have consistently pointed out that North American Indians have refused to vanish from the American scene. That refusal, translated into political terms, has been a conscious attempt by North American Indian communities to demand recognition as Indians and to use that recognition as a basis for their economic development. Lurie calls this political activity an articulatory movement. Articulate, meaning to join with or to give expression to a cultural identity as a minority. Listen. Going from Indians and being classed as minorities, right? As opposed to assimilate, meaning to be absorbed into the system, to disappear as a cultural minority. The painful choice, as Lurie points out, is between survival as an Indian community, perhaps in poverty, and survival as an individual who has assimilated into the dominant society and thus has made it. All right, in parentheses. And, if we see any hijack, we'll point it out, but pretty interesting what, kind of happens. We got to just, discern what is being said with what we have learned, in the last couple of years. Says the primary goal of an articulatory relationship is improving an Indian standard of living while maintaining intact an Indian identity. Indian identity may rest on a complex blend of factors, ranging from tribal language and tribal origins to traits of white origin, reinterpreted in the local context to pan-Indian traits so widely diffused as to be characteristics of many tribal societies. One such pan-Indian feature is the powwow complex. Tribal communities in North Carolina survived more than 300 years of contact with Euro-American society and yet managed to hold on to their Indian identity despite major changes in tribal lifestyle and the loss of their indigenous languages. These surviving Indian communities have been variously referred as remnant Indian communities, mixed bloods, right? All in parentheses, right? Triracial isolates, parentheses, triracial, mixed bloods, mixed with what? Folk societies, racial islands, or marginal peoples. Now remember, guys, keep in mind what we have learned about the true history of the Americas, even when it comes to slavery and what Indians are described to looking like, what Europeans are described to looking like. So when they're saying triracial, mixed bloods, you kind of have an idea already who are they talking about. And a lot of these were melanated folks, so-called black folks. Their tenacity has been attributed to a number of factors, including physical isolation from whites, so-called whites, structural isolation resulting from practices of endogamy and close-knit community life. In this essay, I shall use Lurie's concept of articulatory relationships to interpret the actions of Waccamaw Siouan Indian leaders during the first half of the 20th century. So remember, you guys never heard of the Waccamaw, yeah? They're in the Eastern, southeastern U.S., one of the woodland tribes. But these are Eastern Siouans, just like the Saponi, just like the Catawba, many others, the Sarah, many other tribes that are Eastern Saponi. And of course, these are coming out of the origins, Ohio, the Siouan people, and ended up thousands of years ago in the southeast. A lot of these tribes and Waccamaw, and some of these people, the Waccamaw, Siouan Indian, right? Rather than assimilate into Southern society as either white or black. Listen, why would they? If Indians had their own look, right? Like they're supposed to look a certain way, how would they be assimilated into white or so-called black, especially, right? I thought they weren't dark. How could they assimilate with so-called black? And what does white mean? Remember, all these are, these are tags, crayon colored tags. So you can pass as white as a so-called black person, right? Let's not forget. The people of these small North Carolinian communities choose to assert their Indian identity and to encourage their leaders to negotiate informal contractual agreements with white-dominated government agencies controlling the distribution of public resources and services. All right, controlling, so-called white government. The basis of this relationship was to be recognition as an Indian community. Two areas of activity are reviewed: the fight for Indian schools from 1900 to 1939 on the local and state level, and the battle for recognition through special legislation, 1940 to 1950. On the federal level, the archival and field research on which this essay is based was conducted between 1982 and 1984. It says here the community. The Waccamaw Siouan Indians live in two settlements bordering Columbus and Bladen counties in southeastern North Carolina. The St. James settlement is located in Waccamaw Township, Columbus County, and the Buckhead settlement lies partly in Bolton Township of Columbus County and partly in Carvers Creek Township of Bladen County. About half the approximately 1,500 men, women, and children are currently on tribal roll. Until 1950, farm work and forestry provided the most income for the small landowners, tenant farmers, and sharecroppers. The Waccamaw Siouan economy depended very little on paid public work because it was scarce and difficult to obtain. Since 1950, many younger Waccamaw have left farming and turned to full-time employment in local paper industries, apparel factories, chemical plants, construction, and a variety of positions and professions in the surrounding urban areas. The following occupational fields were represented by economically active male leads of households in 1983 survey of the Buckhead Indian settlement. So again, this is, we don't know who they're really judging this on, what kind of Waccamaw or what type of person they're only asking. All right, so, just keep an open mind. It says construction 47%, forest and paper industry 30%, farming 6%. Of the economically active women, work in the sewing and apparel industries employed many, 45%. 12 tribal surnames, all right, have remained consistent through time. The Blanks, the Baldwin, the Freeman, the Grahams, Jacobs, Kirksey, Mitchell, Moore, Patrick, Spalding, Strickland, and Young. However, these surnames are not evenly represented in the tribe, and each community has been dominated throughout its history by a smaller number of families. For example, in the Buckhead community, with 190 households, the Jacob and the Freeman surname is predominant. All right? Among the Jacob household, 16% of the male heads of household had married women from the Freeman family. Likewise, in the Freeman households, 25% had married women from the Jacob family. Of all the other households within this community with surnames other than Jacob or Freeman, 47% had married with a Jacob or a Freeman. All right? If they're from the same tribe, hey man, it's all family, right? Keeping the tribe going. The Jacob and Freeman families are also among the oldest in the Buckhead community. Abraham Freeman held deeded land in this region as early as 1787, and together with Chadwick Jacobs, a community land base was established along the Buckhead and Ricefield branches running north out of the Green Swamp, just above Lake Waccamaw. All right. So I want to make myself very clear, in case you think I'm just making things up here, and I'm supposedly just blackwashing, trying to steal, so-called Native American identity and give it to so-called blacks. A lot of people say that to me. We were just talking about the Freeman and the Jacobs family, right? That are Waccamaw, right? Waccamaw Indian, right? Waccamaw Indians, right? We just talking about, let's go back. The Jacob and Freeman families, right? One of the oldest people where? We're from? The Waccamaw Struggle Indians. They were born in where? Columbus and Bladen counties in southeastern North Carolina. Bladen County, huh? Waccamaw Indians. We got Freemans and we got Jacobs, right? We got a lot more families, but they're just talking about this one right now, right? And they said that Abraham Freeman held deeded land in this region as early as 1787, and another guy, Shadrach Jacobs, right? Shadrach Jacobs appears in the 1800 federal census of Bladen County. Look, Bladen County, right? But we're talking about Abraham Freeman, right? A Waccamaw Indian, right? Okay, we're gonna go to this book now, and we're already in the process. I'm already recording stuff, do episodes on this book right here. Great book. Shout out to Obi, Opemiha, right? Opie, and he read this a lot in his channel. We're gonna grab little excerpts here and there from it, and just to point out things. Example for like today, we're gonna just show you. I'm gonna show you who Abraham Freeman was. It says here, free African Americans of North Carolina, Virginia, and South Carolina from the colonial period to about 1820. This is from Volume 1. It says here, winner, North Carolina Genealogical Society Award of Excellence in Publishing, and the American Society of Genealogists, Donald Lyons Jacobus Award. This is 4th edition by Paul Heinegg. All right, very popular book, very famous. And we go to page 382 of this book. We're talking about free so-called African Americans, right? So-called African, so-called black people, right? Or are we talking about Indians? It says here, North Carolina, Abraham Freeman, born, say, around 1730, was a free Negro. Oh, a free Negro, taxable in Bladen County. Bladen County, right? Bladen County, let's go back. Abraham Freeman, we're talking about Waccamaw Indians, right? Oh, they don't mention he was a free Negro in here too, or will they? Either way, it says here, Abraham Freeman held deeded land in this region as early as 1787, right? Where Bladen County, again, hold on, let's go back up. The Waccamaw Siouan Indians live in two settlements bordering Columbus and Bladen counties, southeastern North Carolina. And we're talking about the Freemans, right? Among the Jacob households, the Freemans and the Jacobs, some of the oldest families there, remember? It told us right here, the Jacob and Freeman families are also among the oldest in the Baha'i community and Bladen. Abraham Freeman, right? This is the same person. Your Waccamaw Indian, as you guys can see, Abraham Freeman, the Waccamaw Indian, was also listed as a free Negro, so-called black, so-called African American. You guys see how they reclassified people? He's a Waccamaw Indian, but he was taxable in Bladen County, where his wife, right? Bladen County, same person we talking about in that other book, Sue, and daughter, Rachel, in 1763, called Abraham, Sue, Rachel, free Negroes. He was a Negro, in parentheses, man, taxable in Bladen County. Oh, let's go back. Waccamaw, right? Waccamaw, the Waccamaw families, Buckhead Indian Settlement, and Bladen County, right? 12 tribal surnames, Freeman. Abraham Freeman held deeded land in this region, Bladen County, as early as 1787, and together with Shadrach Jacobs. All right, you guys see? A community land base was established along the Buckhead and Richfield branches running north out of the Green Swamp just above Lake Waccamaw. Okay? I'm going to keep reading a little bit of the Freeman family here, just when we're talking about them, right? Now we understand when we're seeing people in this book, we're not just thinking descendants of African slaves, right? Because again, these are free people, free so-called African American. These are Indians. That's why they're free. A lot of your ancestors had the same story, and then what happened? Reclassified. paper genocide. Now all of a sudden you're just a free Negro, right? This is real history here. So it says he was a Negro man, taxable in Bladen County. We got come by Abraham Freeman, the Waccamaw Indian, right? Siouan, pre-Abe in 1771, taxable on 3 males and 1 female in 1774, taxable on 3 males in 1775, and taxable on 300 acres. 5 horses and 15 heads of cattle in 1779. All right, his wife may have been Susanna Freeman, who was taxable with him in Bladen County from 1763 to 1771, called Susanna Freeman in 1770, when she was listed with their daughter. Rachel Freeman, Bird, Bladen County tax list, he and Abigail Chavis were named as executors of the 21 May 1793 Bladen County will of James Moore. All right, he sold 600 acres in Bladen County on Platte Swamp. He was held of a Brunswick County household. All right, Brunswick County, just like the other part where the Waccamaws are. Household of 10 other free and 5 other free in Bladen County in 1810, called Abraham Freeman Sr. He may have been the father of, right? This is the family right here. Rachel, born 1748, Bladen County, and with Abraham and Susanna. Then Samuel, born 1751. That's another Roger. 1753, William, born say 1754, a black. These are Waccamaw Indians, right? A so-called black turned to black. Listen, taxable in Bladen County, called Free Will. In 1771, and called William Freeman, when he was mixed blood. Mixed with what? Taxable. You see what they're doing? Mixed with what? You mean the European side, like European possibly, if any mix? Taxable on 1 male and 1 female in 1774. He was taxable on 2 males, 1775, and taxable on 100 acres, 2 horses, and 3 head of cattle in 1779. He was taxable in Bladen County on 100 acres and 1 black pole in Captain Dupree's district. 1784. He was head of a new Hanover County household of 2 other free in 1790. All right, now we go to another one, Samuel Freeman, another his sons. People, the family of Abraham, right? Born, say, 1751, was a Negro, man. Even though they're Waccamaw, huh? They don't get to be called Waccamaws. They got to call them Negro here, right? To erase the history and take their identity, right? Taxable in Bladen County, 1768 and 1770. Taxable in the household of Isaac Hayes in 1771 and 1772. Listed with the mixed blood taxables in one list for 1774 and called a free Negro. Waccamaw Indian, called a what? Free Negro. Again, these ain't slaves. Taxable in John Smith's list for 1774 when he was taxable on 1 male and 1 female, and taxable on a horse in 1779. All right, remember 1700s, way before slavery supposedly ended. These are people being called Negroes and black, right? He was head of an Onslow County household, 8 other free, in Brunswick County in 1800, and in 9 in Bladen County in 1810. There is no record of his children, but they may have been James, right? You guys can see Isaac, Columbus County, free colored, right? And then his son Roger Freeman, born say 1753, was a Negro man, taxable in Bladen County in 68 and 1770, taxable on 50 acres, a horse, 3 head of a cattle, and in 1709, taxable of 150 acres of 1 black pole in Captain Dupree's district of Bladen County in 1784. He was head of a Bladen County household of 2 blacks, 2 so-called blacks. All right, so it gets worse. Goes from Waccamaw to Negro or free colored, and then the kids are what? Blacks, and then it's blacks, right? Forever, right there, stuck on you, crayon color, and then eventually, like it says on the title of the book, free African American. Where did the African come in? Says he was the head of household on Onslow County household of 7 other free and 8 in 1800. The widow may have been Elizabeth Freeman, head of Brunswick County household, 7 other free. Okay. And it keeps going right here. Freeman family, Abraham Jr. All right. Then it says Virginia. Members of the Freeman family in Virginia were Margaret, born around 1740, Anne, born 1744. Margaret Freeman, born 1740, was a free Negro. You hear that? Living in Nottoway Parish, Amelia County. This is all Indian country too. All these places right here in Virginia, that's Indian country too. When the grand jury presented her for not listing herself as titleable, she may have been the mother of Charles, born, say, 1758, a mulatto boy. So how are they mulatto? Where's the white, so-called white mixing with so-called black? But these are Indians. Where's any white or so-called black? Right? Get what I'm trying to say? Like we broke down in my video the other day, all this erroneous racial classifications got dodged to hijack. Living in Nottoway Parish, Amelia County. Amelia County, that's also Indian country, a lot of Saponis and Catawbas there. When the court ordered the church wardens to bind him as apprentice to John Housing, all right, apprentice, not slavery. That's what I was telling you. Matthew born, say, 1759, that's the other son, a free mulatto, boy living in Nottoway Parish, Amelia County, 28th of February, 1760, and the court ordered the church wardens to bind him as an apprentice to John Housing. And then it says here, Anne Freeman, born 1744, a free mulatta, was the mother of Joseph Freeman, and who was baptized in Bruton Parish, James City County. Her son was one Joseph, baptized 4th of July, 1762. All right, and that's a little bit of the what's written about in the Freemans in this book. Of course, they mention them and bring them up in other stories that are related to other families if they're listed here with court cases or whatever, marriages, things like that. But I just wanted you guys to see, so we know what we're talking about, right? All right, I forgot to say the Chavis. All right, Chavis is also very indigenous family. The Chavis, a lot of them are Catawbas, Saponis as well. You know, I know a couple Chavis, right? Shout out to Anu as well. Shout out to Anu. Chavis is Chavez. Chavis is the same as Chavez family. If you guys didn't know. Schaefer's, Chavis, yeah, all those are related. All right, again, Abraham Freeman, a free Negro, right? A free Negro or a Negro. And we were just talking about Abraham Freeman right here, right, in the Waccamaw book. Again, you know, just before we move on, they was mentioning the Jacobs family. I'm just giving two examples, guys. I can probably find all the families in here. So the Jacobs, as said, right, are one of the oldest Waccamaw, the Jacobs and Freeman, right? Not only Waccamaw, but they have other connections with obviously other tribes, you know, people intermarry and all that. In the book, again, Free African Americans of North Carolina, Virginia, and South Carolina from the colonial period to about 1820 by Paul Heinegg. We go into the Jacobs family, some notes here. And it says here, most of the Lumbee Indian families listed in the 1790 and 1800 Robinson County census as other free are traced in this history back to persons referred to as Negros. Listen, Lumbee Indians, Negros in Virginia. These are the Carter, all right? Chavis. So again, a lot of the Chavis are Saponi and Catawba too, not just Lumbee. Lumbee's like a combination, a lot of different tribes and other things here, guys. Future videos. Kumbo, Gowen, Hammond, Jacobs, right? And not only Jacobs, we're talking about Waccamaw in this case, James and Johnston and Kersey, right? Going back to the book, we got Kersey. And again, 12 tribal surnames have remained consistent through time. This is in the Waccamaw book, right? Where the article we're reading in the Anthropological book. It says the Blanks, the Baldwin, the Freeman, we got them, we found him, the Graham and the Jacobs. That's what we're talking about, right? And Kirksey, look, they're in here too for Waccamaw Indians and also listed under Lumbee Indians. Kersey, the same family, as you guys can see. And again, these are Negros in Virginia, right? We're in the book Free African Americans, so-called African Americans. Locklear, again, for the Lumbee, Manuel, Roberts, and Sweet or Sweat families. Okay? All right, so real quick, we're talking about the Jacobs family, right? Waccamaw Indians and Lumbee. Okay, we got that verified. In Volume 2 of the same book, Free African Americans of North Carolina, Virginia, and Maryland. It says here that there is a Jacobs family that were free in the same areas, right? It says here, we're talking about so-called free blacks, right? Free colored people before slavery. This is 1700s. So now this guy here is one of the progenitors, I guess. So Gabriel Jacobs, born perhaps 1650, and his wife Bab, called Gabriel and Bab, were Negros. Listen to this. How far back they're going. Titleable from 1664 to 1667 in Captain John Cut is Northampton County, Virginia. All right. So just going to get to the part where we're talking about the same people that we're talking about. We're going to go a little further ahead. Right here it says they're probable descendants of North Carolina. Talking about the people we were just talking about earlier. It says here, Abraham, born perhaps 1730. Matthew, born perhaps 1735, received a patent for 160 acres on Hickey Branch on Long Creek in New Hanover County. He was head of the New Hanover County household of 8 other free. All right, so again, this is people going over to North Carolina with the same family. Okay, he mentions his wife Margaret, brother John Jacobs, Zachariah and Primus Jacobs, sons of his unnamed sister. Okay, and it goes on. It says here Matthew Jacobs, he was head of a New Hanover County household of 9 other free, and in 5 in Bladen County, right? Bladen County, the Jacobs. This is the Jacobs of Waccamaw. He sold land by deed proved in New Hanover County in September 1795. Okay, we're gonna keep going. Little further ahead, it says an unnamed sister of Matthew Jacobs, born perhaps 1736, was mentioned in Matthew's 13 September 1786 New Hanover County will. Her children were Zachariah, Peter, right, John, Primus, and who? Shadrach. Listen, Shadrach, born perhaps 1762. Let's go back to the book real quick. Shadrach, right? Says Abraham Freeman held deeded land in this region as early as 1787, and together with Shadrach Jacobs, the same guy I'm gonna show you, Shadrach Jacobs, a community land base was established along the Buckhead and Ricefield branches. Okay, says Shadrach Jacob appears in the 1800 federal census of Bladen County, with 6 family members listed as all other free persons. This is what I'm about to show you guys. See how it came together, as opposed to either white or slave. 3 other persons. They didn't even want to call them Indians. The Waccamaw family surname are consistently referred to in this fashion in this early census, right? They're not talking about any color here, though, right? They even left out the free colored. They only pointed out that he was called all other free persons, but I'm going to show you what else. So the small number of people listed all other free persons in Bladen County in 1800 of a total county population, because everybody else was being listed as something else, guys. And the proximity, so including 4,500 whites, again, these could just be lighter skinned people, 2,299 so-called slaves or indentured or apprentice people, could be also family. Don't get it mixed up. And the proximity of these 2 early ancestors to the present Waccamaw community of Buckhead suggests that survival depended upon isolation, social endogamy, and strategy of articulation rather than assimilation. Endogamy may have preserved a sense of community identity, fostered a feeling of distinctiveness as a people, and established a basis from which Indian leaders could operate and forge articulatory relationships on behalf of the community. Again, Indian leaders. They're trying to sugarcoat what's really going on here in this article, guys. That's why I wanted to break it down for you to understand. Okay? Again, we go back to the book Free African Americans of North Carolina from 1820, Paul Heinegg. Remember, this is a very genealogical, scholarly book. This has got awards and stuff. We're going to see here, right? She had a son named Shadrach. We're talking about the same one, Shadrach Jacobs. We're going to go down to where it talks about him. It says here, Shadrach Jacobs, born perhaps 1762, bought 75 acres in Bladen County, near the Brunswick County line of 6 Ferry, 1798. He was head of a Bladen County household of 6 other free in 1800, and 6 in 1810, and 7 free colored. There you go, colored. Free colored in Columbus County in 1820. He called himself Shadrach Jacob of Columbus County in his 27 April 1818 Bladen County will, naming his wife Mary and children Arthur and Peggy. Free colored. What? Free colored Jacobs in the book African Americans, right? So-called African Americans, right? They calling this guy right here, Shadrach from the Waccamaws, oldest families, right? The Jacobs. They're calling him a free African American. But they left that out in this book, right? Let's continue now. It says tribal leadership, articulatory relationships are generated through the actions of individuals who emerge as leaders and spokesmen for the Indian community, and it's dealing with the dominant society. Such leadership requires skill and negotiation. The leaders must have the confidence of their own people and of those in the agencies of the dominant society with whom they interact. They must be able to persuade the representatives of the dominant society that their community deserves and has rights to certain services because of their Indian status. Furthermore, when necessary, leaders must be able to recruit the help of friendly so-called whites to act as brokers or mediators for the Indian community. These might be lawyers, businessmen, government officials, anthropologists, and others. Articulation demands that Indian leaders on behalf of their community seek services, benefits, and rights by establishing linkages based on an underlying recognition by the dominant society that they are an Indian community. Look what they have to go through. Now, you saw these people were also being called free Negros, free colored people, blacks. So imagine that, and now you have a background why these people are going through so much hard stuff just to, have to be maintained separate and not be reclassified. Listen, centrality in the kinship system, dedication to community issues, affability, generosity, charisma, and good communication skills are all qualities central to the definition of Waccamaw leadership. Waccamaw leaders have generally lived within one of the settlements near their family and kin. Leaders were prepared to spend a great deal of time on community issues. They exhibited good sense, a nice personality, and the ability to communicate and get along with insiders as well as outsiders. Formal education was advantageous, but never a requirement, since in the past educational opportunities were greatly limited. As one Waccamaw put it, mother wit was essential, referring to common sense and experience. Leaders participated in community-wide affairs, and church membership was essential. Articulation required leaders who could effectively negotiate between the Indian community and outsiders. There were special domains of influence, economic, religious, or educational. Some rose to prominence within the community because of individual economic success, defined as the ability to secure employment for Indians in their own businesses or industries, or by hiring Indian assistants to work with them in some skilled areas such as carpentry, logging, or turpentine manufacture on contracts with whites outside the tribal settlements. Those leaders with special influence within the religious domain served one of the tribal churches as preachers or pastors. Such religious leaders might gain a reputation outside the Indian settlements as well. And finally, education, a dominant concern to the Waccamaw in the early 20th century, called for dedication and articulate leaders who were willing to serve on the local school committees where they represented interests of the tribe to the county and state school boards. The domains were not mutually exclusive, nor were leaders prevented from operating in more than one at a time, nor were they ranked, dependent upon the issues that were before the community at a given time. One domain might become more important than the others. The Waccamaw leaders operated within an essentially egalitarian society with little formal political organization. Formal rank and hierarchy were absent, and even the number of leadership positions varied from time to time. In more recent times, W.J. Freeman became recognized by the majority of the tribe as chief spokesman. He held this role from 1924 until 1949. Now, I want to just point out here, right? This is almost 200 years later. We're talking about the free African Americans, right? 1730s to like 1790s that we were talking about, right? Almost 200 years later, now we got this other, these other Freemans, right? And no, so this is what I'm saying, because by this time, most colored folks were already classified as Negro, Black, African Americans, and they believed it, or they had forgotten what their grandma said. They had been, reclassified, and the ones that were, kind of forgot their history. They thought they were part African, part Indian. They kind of forget the whole specific, narratives or stories or what really happened, ethnicity of their own people. Okay, so I just want to point that out when we're talking about these modern people. He held this role from 1924 until 1949, when the council appointed the Reverend R.T. Freeman to lead the fight for federal recognition. In 1950, he passed the position on to his nephew, Clifton Freeman Sr., who held the position until his death in 1985. The chief spokesman embodied the equal qualities of leaders. He was said to have spent more hours, energy, and effort than the others. He was also more articulate and better able to establish the contractual relationships with the outside world so necessary to improving conditions within tribal settlements. Furthermore, success depended upon his ability to establish these relationships while maintaining the important Indian identity of his tribe. And it says here the Wide Awake Indian Council, 1910 to 1950. The Wide Awake Indian Council of the Waccamaw tribe is the earliest remembered governing body. According to oral history, it was established in 1910. From then until 1950, the council provided the leadership necessary to pursue two important objectives: winning county and state recognition as Indians so that tax dollars could be used to fund Indian schools in the Waccamaw settlements, and passing a bill in the U.S. Congress designating them the Waccamaw Sioux tribe of North Carolina. This is what they were fighting for, right? In those times. They worked toward these goals by establishing articulatory relationships with the local, state, and federal government. The council was comprised of men of age who were chosen by family groups living within the tribal settlements and met in homes, churches, or in the settlement schools. At such times, council members gave reports of their travels on behalf of the tribe and discussed community concerns. Council membership ran along family lines, and the tenure of council members was determined by continuing support from family members and by the members' willingness to serve. The council 1900 to 1945 worked closely with a specially appointed school committee whose duty was to speak before the county school boards on behalf of the tribe, and with a special committee to seek federal recognition. The first objective of the council was to achieve recognition that they were Indians from local and state officials, and as such had the right to Indian schools within their communities. Even before 1900, community representatives had been placed on the local school committees in Columbus County in order to ensure direct participation by Indian parents in the education of their children. Although not totally effective, the tribe sought to maintain de facto control over the schools during a time when the schools, which the Indians attended were officially open to both Indians and blacks, so-called blacks. Now, I just want to, again, you got to dodge the hijack because this book is trying to distinguish, it's trying to make these Indians look a certain way, like what we picture them today. What they want us to picture Indians looking like today. In the powwows mainly, right? When you go there, you do see black folks, but you also see a lot of other people. And when you Google Indian today or Native American, you're going to get a whole different image of what we were just reading in this book, right? Remember, free Negros, right? The Freeman family, free Negros, free African Americans of North Carolina, right? So what do you mean between both Indians and blacks? So who's the Indians and who's the blacks? Because the Indians were being called blacks. Get what I'm trying to say, right? So even though what they're trying to say is they want to get their recognition as Indians, because they might turn this into an all-colored school or just a public school, because now there's people looking like different categories that you want to categorize people in this school. It's not just Indians, supposedly. Oral history of these years describes them as ones during which the tribe was learning how to influence the local white school administrators. From the actions of the Waccamaw leaders, it can be deduced that they were aware that earlier, 1885, the state of North Carolina had opened schools for the Croatan Indians. The Croatan, oh wow, and we got videos on this, and a lot of you, know your genealogy and like, hey, this is my family, and I see all these colored so-called black folks and these old pictures of the Croatan Indians, and these areas too, Robinson County and adjoining counties. Right, and also remember the history with the Sephardic Jews and also in these Indians. We got videos on this, right? Since the state acknowledged the rights of Croatan Indians, the Waccamaw leaders sought to have themselves designated Croatan too. Successful strategies of articulation typically diffuse from one Indian community to the next as leaders experiment with various approaches to achieve their goals. But gaining recognition as a Croatan Indian was never a satisfactory solution for the Waccamaw, because outside the state it was seen merely as a convenient label for a group with mixed ancestry. You guys hear that? Mixed ancestry. What is that mixture? And not necessarily, if you see a so-called black person, that it means that it's African. And that dark color could have came from the Indian and from the Sephardic Jews and Portuguese that were mixing with them, the black Europeans. And it did not guarantee any other rights. Even within North Carolina, the label Croatan, shortened to Crow, was being used by some whites to mean Negro. Listen, why was it being used by some whites to mean Negro? Croatan literally was synonymous with Negro. Are you guys hearing? This is what I was trying to tell you. There were so many colored folks in the Croatan tribes that whites used the word synonymous with what? Negro. Some whites, right? And that's all sources here, right? All these sources he just listed. However, the Waccamaw continued with this strategy for winning the right to Indian schools, and in 1914, the question of Indian schools came to the attention of the county school superintendent, F.T. Wooten, and the federal Indian agent, O.M. McPherson, who was in charge of an investigation into the conditions of the Croatan Indians of southeastern North Carolina. An entry in Book 1 of the School Board Minutes of Columbus County in 1920 shows that the Indian schools question was still unsettled as members of the Wide Awake Indian Council continued to pressure the board for separate schools. Separate, what are they really trying to separate from, right? The color, the dark color? The Waccamaw or the tag, right? The tag, if they're real people, if they're also people in color in these committees and the five they're trying to separate from. But in general, this is going to lead to them being used to try to say, well, you're not an Indian, you're black, so you don't get to be in that school anymore or whatever. You're not. And then, as they start separating people like they do today, right now you're just a black Indian instead of just an Indian or Native American. They call you, that's a black Native American, that's a black Indian. They don't call themselves white Indians, right? So the Waccamaw tribal leaders hired Donald McRacon, an attorney, to present their case to Dr. E.C. Brooks, superintendent of public instruction, arguing that since the Croatan of other counties had already won separate Indian schools, their rights as Indians were being denied. McRacon was informed by the state superintendent that the law does not compel the County Board of Education to provide separate schools for the Indians of its county. So they're saying, hey, how come if you did it with other Indian tribes, they got to be class and, why can't you do it with us? This action may have been precipitated by the Columbus School Board's refusal to allow the Waccamaw School Committee to keep non-Indian children from attending their schools. Now remember, we had members of the Freeman and the Jacobs, as we saw, settling in Columbus County, right? And they were in that book, Free African Americans. The board reprimanded the tribal school committee and threatened to take them to court unless they opened their schools to all colored children. Listen, the board said, no, you gotta integrate with all so-called black children or colored children. So maybe they didn't want to because not all of them were, of their tribe or just Indian, But this is what I'm saying. We gotta see both sides of this. How they're denying these people to identify, but at the same time they're trying to make them blend with others also, and then so they can all be listed as colored. Now you all mixed. Now you all just Negroes and colored. I bet you a lot of those other colored children were American Indians as well. From their tribe or their other tribe, they had already been reclassified. Perhaps because of slow communication, the Waccamaw were trying to be recognized as Croatan. At the same time, the name was being dropped in favor of Cherokee. Listen, let's just call ourselves Cherokee. I'm Cherokee. I'm Cherokee and black. But I told you that's a generalized term. A lot of times Cherokee meant other Indian tribes. This is what I'm saying to you guys. I've been telling you that for years. It might be more than just Cherokee. Look into it. Follow and trace your people. See where they end up. And you're going to see Cherokee weren't in those areas. They were mostly in the very eastern part of North Carolina, but mostly Tennessee. A lot in Tennessee, Eastern Carolina, and the mountains. but not in all the areas of North Carolina or Virginia or South Carolina, as people assume. Georgia, by those already designated Croatan, Robinson County. They took on Cherokee, right? The Croatan people. Thereafter, from 1913 and 1953, Cherokee was synonymous with Indian within the state. All right? Body bag for the illusion. I told you guys. Literally, not only in 1913, 1950, but in the 1700s, it was also synonymous with Indian. Cherokee. A lot of different Indians came under the classification of Cherokee. That's why a lot of black folks or Southern people say, I'm Cherokee and Blackfoot. That's all they kind of heard. That's what their moms thought a lot of the time, even though some were Cherokee, others were not. Many were not. All right? They were coming from other tribes. Again, that word became synonymous with Indian. Within the state, Cherokee protected by state law and provided with state tax dollars to support education. Listen. So because, that's a big one right here. So that's where the money was. In order for you to get recognized and get funded, a lot of Indians took on the name Cherokee because it was protected by state law and provided with state tax dollars to support education. All right. Unable to control admission to their community schools in 1923, some parents in the Buckhead community, where a lot of the Freeman ended up too, abandoned the county schoolhouse and moved their children to St. Mark Church, where they would have direct control. Others began to construct their own schoolhouse. This situation was accepted by the Columbus School Board because in 1924, the Wide Awake Indian Council, led by W.J. Freeman, had managed to convince the school board to reimburse the tribe for expenses incurred during the use of a church for school purposes 2 years. That year, 1924, tribal members deeded land to the board for a school in the Indian settlement of St. James. Evidence that the school authorities accepted this situation appeared in the board minutes for 1927, when 2 Indian settlement-controlled schools and their committees appeared on the school list. Events of the 1920s reveal that tribal efforts was concentrated on controlling entry to the Indian community schools and on pressing the board for recognition as an Indian community. Tribal leaders worked simultaneously on both the local and state levels. In 1927, Waccamaw leaders dropped their campaign to be identified as Croatan and tried instead to be designated Cherokee. Look what's going on with this Eastern Siouan people. First, let's call ourselves Croatan. So a lot of them did become Croatan eventually. Then after that, let's just designate as Cherokee. Now you're a Cherokee, right? Now you're part of the 5 civilized tribes, but you're Eastern Siouan. You forget your whole history. And then you talk bad about the Sioux, the Siouan people, thinking they're all Plains Indians. Yeah, I'm saying something very deep. A lot of people do that to me. Those ain't us. What do you mean? You didn't know Siouan people were in the East Coast? They hired Thomas Johnson, an attorney from Lumberton, North Carolina, to present their argument to an unsympathetic school board. Once again, a successful strategy for articulation was adopted from the Lumbee of Robinson County. The Waccamaw won a minor battle when they successfully passed Chapter 213, Public School Law, in 1927, or Chapter 213. This law guaranteed separate schools to the Cherokee of Columbus County. Now, because they went under Cherokee, now they got to do that, and now they got funded. So look at this strategy. And then now anybody can be Cherokee, right? Like today, a lot of people that probably have very, very little Indian blood get to be Cherokee. And that's where the money was. That's what people followed too. No action was taken to implement the law. By 1928, the school board's inaction caused the tribal council to press mandamus proceedings through their attorney. Then in 1929, the Columbus County Board of Education and the Columbus County Commissioners lobbied successfully for the repeal of Chapter 213. This stopped the flow of state and county funds to the support of Indian schools. With characteristic persistence, Waccamaw leader W.J. Freeman continued to appear in the board minutes, presenting the needs of the Indian community, including that of well-trained Indian teachers. St. James committeeman George Mitchell asserted his Indian status when he refused to accept a position on the school committee until the board granted him recognition as an Indian. Then in 1933, the tribe experienced a victory when the Bladen County Board, right, of Education accepted the proposition that the Waccamaw deserved separate Indian schools, granting them permission to open the first such school within their community on the Bladen side of the county line. This first county-funded Indian school was known as the Wide Awake Indian School. Wide Awake. Stimulated by this success, tribal members living in Columbus County once again renewed their efforts and petitioned the board to officially designate the St. Mark's School, held in the community church by the same name, an Indian school. Their petition failed, but they maintained their efforts until 1945, when the Columbus County Board of Education finally agreed to support separate county schools for Indians. Throughout this struggle, now this is the thing, now by 1945, who are they designated? Indians only, right? This is very deep right here. Throughout this struggle, the Wide Awake Indian Council played an important role, providing leadership which presented the Indian position to the local and state education officials. Their actions showed that they deliberately chose an articulatory relationship rather than an assimilative one. The county and the state provided schools for colored children, throughout this period, and it would have been easy for the Indian leaders to simply accept the situation. Why would it have been easy to them to assimilate with colored folks? Listen to what they're really telling you behind the lines here, guys. It would have been easy for them, right? Yet they chose to press for separately funded schools as a strategy for maintaining their separate Indian identity. So not only this race thing, like, oh, I don't want to be associated with colored folks, but also I don't want to be associated with that tag. That means nothing. That's color doesn't mean, that doesn't describe you, who your ancestors were, right? They fought hard, but it kind of went real opposite, right? Because now they kept turning the colored people into more colored, into so-called black, into eventually African American, right? Federal recognition from 1940 to 1950. The Wide Awake Council appointed W.J. Freeman to the position of council chairman in 1940. Under his leadership, council members embarked upon a course which they hoped would end in federal recognition of all or some portion of the Indian community. W.J. Freeman acted as chief spokesman for the council, a position which had evolved during the previous 20 years when he had repeatedly appeared at school board meetings to argue the Indian case. In 1949, just before the Waccamaw were to present their case to Congress, the position of council chairman passed to Reverend R.T. Freeman. Reverend Freeman and the council hired Mr. James E. Alexander, a white man, to help research the community history and represent them in Washington as they pursued federal recognition. This was consistent with their earlier pattern of working through white brokers or lawyers who would represent the tribe's interests. Handing over all the trust to so-called white brokers or lawyers. When the tribe submitted supporting documents to the U.S. Congress and the Bureau of Indian Affairs in 1949, they referred to themselves as the Wide Awake Indian Council of the Waccamaw Sioux tribe. This was the first time that the name Waccamaw Sioux appeared in print in an official way referring to the tribe. However, the name Siouan appears to have been in wide use within the state by the Indians of Robinson County. In the 1930s, the Robinson County Cherokee Indians had formed, the Siouan Lodge of the National Council of American Indians. They weren't really Cherokee Indians, they were Siouans. All these people in Robinson County, through which they were seeking federal recognition as the Siouan Indians of the Lumber River. From U.S. Senate Report 1943. As in the past, Waccamaw leaders were in contact with Indian leaders from Robinson County, and they adopted the same articulation strategy in their 1940 to 1950 effort to become federally recognized. The Wide Awake Indian Council attached Siouan onto the name Waccamaw, referring both to their county and to the lake by which they had always lived. Use of the name Siouan was apparently fairly widespread, as Gilbert notes in his survey of Indians within the state. In November of 1949, members of the Wide Awake Indian Council traveled to Washington, D.C. in the company of James Alexander, There they visited the BIA offices, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, right, seeking the advice on how to pursue their objective of federal recognition through their representative, Alexander. The tribe also made contact with the Association of American Indian Affairs of New York City. The president of the association, Oliver Lafarge, and the association's executive director, Alexander Lesser, both anthropologists, were persuaded by Alexander to look into the Waccamaw case. Later, they became convinced that the Waccamaw had the right to federal recognition as an Indian tribe. The Washington attorney and the counsel to the association, Felix Cohen, reviewed the Waccamaw case and eventually drafted a bill to the U.S. Congress, which became known as the Waccamaw Bill, H.R. 7153 and H.R. 7299. In consultation with Cohen, the Waccamaw decided to place their land in trust in order to establish a land base for tribal members living in the Buckhead area. This was done to prevent any further lost landholdings. At a meeting in the Buckhead area, 157 Waccamaw adults signed a resolution stating their support of the terms of the Waccamaw Bill. The bill was submitted to Congress in the spring of 1950 and directed to a House committee that referred the matter to the Office of Indian Affairs in April of that year. By the end of May, the Office of Indian Affairs, headed by Dylan Meyer, was encouraged by Alexander Lesser to expedite matters. The legislation proposed two steps. One, give the Waccamaw Indians protection as regards their land, and two, give them rights and privileges as a tribe under the Indian Reorganization Act of 1934. By August of 1950, the Office of Indian Affairs had returned a negative response to the House committee, recommending that the Waccamaw bill be defeated. While sympathetic to the Waccamaw petition, DODI, the Assistant Secretary of the Interior, expressed the fear that recognition of the Waccamaw would encourage many other unrecognized groups in North Carolina and other eastern and southeastern states to seek recognition, mainly colored folks, right? They're like, no, it's going to encourage all the other colored folks to, fight for their Indian name and identity. That's deep right here, what they just said. Thus, despite considerable efforts on the part of the Association for the Waccamaw, the bill was defeated in late summer of 1950. All right. So for the Dismal says here, summary. The brief essay has presented highlights of the history of the Waccamaw Sioux during the first half of this century, when they and their leaders focused attention on the pursuit of articulatory relationships with the dominant American society in order to preserve their community identity as Indians. Lurie's model of articulatory relationship was used to further our understanding of the Waccamaw leadership style and what at first glance appeared to be rather contradictory actions concerning the name and identity of the tribe. While this contradictory action may suggest to some that the Waccamaw were insecure in their own identity, it is argued in this essay that the Waccamaw leaders knew precisely what they were doing and why, faced with the choice of assimilation or articulation. Wow. You either become black, Negro, colored, white, right? Or you gotta, articulate your name and change your name to Cherokee or some other thing, right? They repeatedly chose the harder road of articulation and their determination to maintain an Indian identity for their community, and to use that recognition to further the socioeconomic development of the community. So eventually, a lot of these people just became Cherokees because they didn't want to be considered so-called black, colored, or, unrecognized as an Indian. Furthermore, the negotiating skills required of leaders, which emphasize communication, affability, getting along, and mother wit, are particularly well suited to the process of articulation. All right, that's the end of this article. I hope you guys, enjoyed the little reading. It may be, I think this is big right here. This shows you a little of the process of how, the reclassification came and how, as you guys can see, you forget about who people are and whitewash people or history. If I didn't show you guys this book, be honest, a lot of you, not all of you, but a lot of you, because a lot of you already know the history, who these families are and the areas and who's living there. But a lot of other people don't. They would assume they were talking to people that look what you think of a Native American today when they're talking about the oldest families here, the Freeman and Jacobs and all the rest they listed here, right? Again, that was from the Southern Anthropological Society, Proceedings number 21. Appreciate you guys sticking around all the way to the end. I hope you enjoyed it and see how very revealing it is. Hope you understand what I was saying too, and not just reading. Reading between the lines, what we're reading, right? Appreciate you taking the time to be here. I'll give you your time back. Much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Hawa.